Welcome to the Science of Hockey, the podcast where we break down the science behind ice hockey. I'm the analyst, your host, and every week we explore the data, research, and evidence that shape how we play, train, and understand the game of hockey. From biomechanics to performance psychology, we take you beyond the rink and into the research lab, giving you insights that go beyond hearsay and into what really makes the difference on the ice. Whether you're a player, a coach, a parent, or just someone passionate about the sport, we're here to bring you scientifically backed information in a language that's friendly and easy to understand. So grab your skates and let's dive into the science of hockey. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Science of Hockey. I'm the analyst, and today we're talking about an innovative approach to youth player development, biobanding. In this episode, we'll explore what biobanding is and how it impacts both players and coaches. The study focuses on the experiences of 12 to 13-year-old hockey players and how grouping them by biological maturity rather than chronological age can create new developmental opportunities. We'll discuss the benefits, challenges, and how this approach could shape the future of youth hockey development. Whether you're a player, coach, or parent, this episode is packed with insights that can change the way we think about talent identification and player growth. So grab your gear, and let's dive into the science behind biobanding.
All right, so have you ever been to a youth hockey game and you look out on the ice and it's like, whoa, some of these kids are already they're huge.
Yeah.
They look like mini NHL players out there, and some look like they haven't quite hit their growth spurt yet.
Yeah.
So how do we make youth hockey fairer, so that every kid has a chance to develop and reach their potential?
Right.
And that's where this idea of biobanding comes in.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of grouping kids just by their age, what if we grouped them based on how far along they are physically?
Fascinating concept, right? Like you said, leveling the playing field so that skill and hockey IQ can really shine through.
Exactly. And, we actually have some really interesting research from Sweden to unpack today.
Okay.
They actually tried out biobanding in a real youth hockey club.
Oh, wow.
And they looked at how the players felt about it and also how the coaches changed their scouting preferences.
Okay.
And one of the first things that I thought was really interesting was they found that defensemen tended to mature earlier than offensive players.
That's interesting.
It makes you wonder, right?
Yeah.
Are we subconsciously kind of pigeonholing players based on these early physical traits?
It's definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
And it makes you think about, the biases that we might bring when we're evaluating talent.
Right.
So if a coach is looking for a big, strong defenseman,
Right.
they might just automatically go for the early maturers.
Right.
Without even thinking about the long-term potential of maybe a smaller, more agile player who might, become amazing later on.
It's like we're judging a book by its pre-puberty cover, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We just see a big kid and we assume that they're going to be the best player.
Yeah, and that actually ties into what the study found about strength, speed, and maturity.
Oh, really? Tell me more.
They found that absolute strength and power were very closely linked to how mature the kids were.
Okay.
But speed and endurance weren't.
So just because a kid can rip a slap shot now doesn't mean they're going to be the fastest skater in a couple of years.
Exactly. And it challenges the whole idea that if you mature early athletically, you're automatically going to be successful long term.
Right, because there's so much more to it than just size and strength.
Exactly. Agility, hockey sense,
Yeah.
mental toughness, all these things are just as important, and they develop over time.
Right. So how did they actually divide the players into these biobands?
So they used a method called the Camis-Roche method,
Okay.
which basically predicts how tall a player will be as an adult
Oh, cool.
based on their height and weight now and also the height of their parents.
Okay.
And then they split the players into two bands.
Okay.
Bioband lower for the kids who were projected to be shorter,
Right.
and a bioband higher for the taller players.
Okay, so now we got our bioband set up.
Yeah.
What happened when these kids actually hit the ice and started playing?
One of the most surprising findings was that biobanding actually made the differences in physical attributes smaller within each game,
Really?
but it made the differences in age bigger.
That's so weird because you'd think that players who are closer in age would be more physically similar.
You would, right?
Yeah.
But it shows what biobanding is trying to do.
Okay.
It's trying to create a more level playing field physically.
Right.
So instead of having these huge mismatches in size and strength, you get a more balanced competition
Okay.
where skill and strategy and making good decisions are more important.
So it's less about just being the biggest and strongest and more about brains and finesse.
Yeah, exactly.
I love it.
And that change could have a big impact on how the game is played and how these young players develop.
Okay, so this all sounds great, like in theory.
Yeah.
But what did the players actually think about biobanding?
Right.
Like, was it actually a better experience for them?
That's the important question.
Right.
So the researchers used questionnaires to get the players' perspectives. And they focused on how the players felt when they were playing against opponents of different maturity levels.
So some players ended up playing against more mature opponents
Right.
than they were used to.
Exactly.
And others were playing against less mature opponents.
Right. Some were playing against kids at basically the same level of development.
Okay, so it's like they had these mini experiments
Yeah.
within the bigger biobanding experiment.
Exactly.
What did they find? Like, were there any patterns?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So the players who were now playing against more mature opponents,
Okay.
they said that it felt more demanding physically, tactically, and even mentally.
It makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you're constantly going up against bigger, stronger players, you really got to be on your toes all the time.
Right. And while that's challenging, it can be really good for a player's development.
I can see that.
It forces them to think faster, react quicker, and really hone their skills to compete.
Right.
Now, on the other hand, the players who were playing against less mature opponents, they felt a lot more capable of using their skills and actually leading the play.
So they had more space to work with, more time to make decisions, and more chances to be creative.
Exactly. They felt empowered to take risks, try new moves, and really dictate the game.
I love that.
And that kind of freedom can be so beneficial for developing confidence and creativity.
Right, because they're not just reacting to the pressure. They're
Yeah.
actually setting the pace and style of the play.
Exactly.
It's really fascinating how biobanding seems to create these different opportunities and challenges for players
Yeah.
based on how mature they are physically.
Right. It's almost like a customized learning experience.
Yeah, I like that.
And it goes back to that balance we talked about before. You want to push players to improve, but you don't want to overwhelm them
Right.
or stifle their creativity.
Okay, so we've heard from the players.
Yeah.
But what about the coaches?
Right.
How did biobanding affect their view of talent?
Mm.
And like who they were looking for when they were scouting players? Did it change their preferences at all?
Well, this is where things got really interesting.
Okay.
The researchers had 29 coaches watch games,
Okay.
and then they had them pick players for a pretend high school team.
Like a fantasy draft.
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
And they did this for both age-based and biobanded games.
So they got to see the players in both settings.
Right.
That's cool.
And here's the surprise in both formats.
Mm-hmm.
The coaches actually preferred the smaller, later maturing players.
Wow, seriously. You'd think that in a sport like hockey where physicality is so important,
Yeah.
the coaches would just automatically go for the biggest, strongest players.
Right? You would think that.
So what's going on here?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
Maybe the coaches were consciously or unconsciously trying to avoid looking biased.
Okay.
You know, like they didn't want to seem like they were only picking the big kids.
Right, like they had to prove that they were looking beyond just size and strength.
Right. Or maybe
Yeah.
those smaller, later maturing players had developed different skills and a different style of play.
Because they couldn't just rely on being the biggest kid on the ice.
Exactly. And that actually fits with a theory called the underdog hypothesis.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this underdog advantage.
So basically, it suggests that players who face challenges early on,
Yeah.
they develop special skills and resilience
Okay.
that you might not see in players who dominate early on just because of their size and strength.
So they've had to find other ways to contribute
Right.
or make an impact.
Yes, they've had to develop those intangible qualities that often separate good players from great players.
Like work ethic, determination.
Right, the ability to adapt and overcome, and those are the things that coaches are really looking for in the end.
Whether they realize it or not.
Exactly.
It makes you think that maybe biobanding isn't just creating a fairer playing field.
Yeah.
It's also revealing this hidden pool of talent
Right.
that we might have missed in a traditional age-based system.
Exactly. That's the point. It challenges our whole idea of what talent is.
Right.
And makes us look beyond just the obvious physical stuff.
So biobanding is shaking things up, not just on the ice,
Yeah.
but also in the minds of coaches and scouts.
It's a real paradigm shift, and the implications could be huge.
Okay, well, we've covered a lot here.
We have.
And it feels like we're just getting started with this biobanding thing.
Yeah.
So before we move on, let's just take a minute to recap what we've learned.
Okay, good idea. It's always good to pause and make sure we're all on the same page.
So from this Swedish study, it looks like biobanding is showing some real promise.
Yeah.
In terms of creating a more physically balanced and potentially fairer playing field.
Right.
It allows players to develop at a pace that makes sense for them.
Yeah.
Whether they're early bloomers or late bloomers.
Exactly. And it's also making coaches rethink how they evaluate talent.
Right.
They're starting to look beyond just size and strength and consider a wider range of skills and attributes.
And we've also learned about this fascinating underdog hypothesis, which suggests that the players who face more challenges early on, they might actually develop unique skills and resilience that make them really valuable in the long run.
Exactly.
But of course, this is just one study, and there's still so much more to learn.
Right. We need to look at the long-term effects of biobanding.
Right.
And the challenges of putting it into practice on a larger scale.
Yeah. And how it might change the game of hockey in the years to come.
It definitely.
Feels like we've opened up a whole can of worms here.
A little bit.
But that's the exciting part of a deep dive, right?
Absolutely.
It's not about finding all the answers. It's about embracing the complexity and the unknown.
It's about being curious, challenging assumptions, and exploring new possibilities.
Exactly. And with that in mind, let's shift our focus to the bigger picture and think about the potential impact of biobanding on the future of hockey.
Okay.
And maybe even youth sports as a whole.
I'm ready. Let's do it. So one thing that's important to remember, it's this study really focused on players who were just starting puberty.
Right, like those 12 and 13-year-olds.
Yeah, exactly.
The ones going through those crazy growth spurts.
Yeah, so the effects of biobanding could become even more obvious as those kids get older and the physical differences between them get even bigger.
You know, it makes me think about injuries, too. Like, if you have a smaller player who's not as physically mature going up against these, like, giants on the ice, wouldn't they be more likely to get hurt?
It's a good point.
Yeah.
And it's definitely something that more research should look into.
Right.
But you would think that if you could reduce the size and strength differences between players,
right,
it would probably make the game safer.
Yeah, that makes sense just from a purely physical standpoint.
Right.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a second.
Okay.
And think about the big picture.
Yeah.
If biobanding became like a normal thing in youth hockey, how do you think it would change the sport overall? It's almost like a philosophical question.
It is. It makes us rethink how we think about talent and development and even like what competition really means, right? For one thing, it could lead to coaches training players completely differently. If they're not so focused on size and strength anymore.
Right.
They might start working on things like skating technique, puck handling, and tactical awareness much earlier.
Yeah, so it's like we're shifting the focus from brute force to finesse.
Exactly.
From just being bigger to being smarter and more skilled.
Right. And that could change things all the way up to the professional level.
Wow.
We might see a whole new kind of hockey player coming up through the ranks.
So a player who's more adaptable, more creative.
Right.
And ultimately more successful because they've developed a more well-rounded set of skills.
Exactly.
That's pretty exciting to think about.
Yeah, it's really cool to imagine the game evolving past this idea that bigger is always better.
Right.
And embracing a more nuanced approach to how we identify and develop talent.
And it could open doors for players who might have been overlooked in the past.
Definitely.
It's just because they weren't the biggest or strongest kids in their age group.
Right? We might discover all these hidden gems who have amazing potential, but just needed a more level playing field to show what they can do.
Think about all the late bloomers who could really thrive in a system like that.
Yeah.
Kids who might have gotten discouraged or even quit hockey because they were smaller than their peers.
It's definitely possible.
It really shows how biobanding could make the game fairer and also expand the talent pool and give more young athletes a chance to reach their full potential.
Right. It doesn't matter when they hit their growth spurt.
Exactly.
They still have the chance to excel.
It's almost like we're democratizing the sport, giving everyone a fair shot to play and succeed based on their own individual skills and abilities.
I like that. And it fits with this growing trend in youth sports to focus more on long-term athlete development.
Right.
And creating a more inclusive and supportive environment where every kid can thrive.
Okay, so we've talked about all the potential good things.
Yeah.
But let's be real. Are there any downsides or challenges to making biobanding more widespread?
Well, of course, whenever you make a big change,
Right.
there are going to be some bumps along the way.
Yeah.
One of the biggest challenges is figuring out how to determine biological maturity accurately and consistently.
Right.
The Kamis-Roche method that they used in the Swedish study is a good start.
Okay.
but it's not perfect. And there are other methods out there, too.
So we would need a system for assessing maturity that everyone agrees on and that can be used across different leagues and organizations.
Right. Otherwise, it could become really subjective, and that would defeat the whole purpose of biobanding.
Right. It wouldn't be fair if it was up to each individual coach or league to decide how mature a player is.
Exactly. And then there's also the possibility that people who were used to the traditional age-based system might push back against biobanding.
Like coaches' parents, even some players.
Yeah, they might be resistant to change, especially if they don't really understand why biobanding is important.
Right, or if they're worried about how it will affect their team's performance.
Exactly.
People don't always like change, especially when it comes to something like youth sports that's been done the same way for so long.
Yeah, people might be worried about fairness or whether the assessments are accurate or just the unknown.
Yeah, so education and communication are going to be really important.
Right.
To help people understand and accept biobanding.
We need to explain the benefits not just for individual players, but for the whole sport.
Exactly.
And I think it's important to make it clear that biobanding isn't about getting rid of competition altogether.
Yeah.
It's about making competition more fair.
Right.
So that talent and skill can really shine through no matter how physically mature a player is.
Exactly. It's about creating a development-focused environment where winning is still important.
Right.
But it's not the only thing that matters.
It's about helping every player reach their potential and develop a love for the game that will last a lifetime.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's imagine for a minute that biobanding has been successfully implemented in youth hockey.
What might that look like? Would we see a totally new kind of hockey player?
I think we would, for one thing, I think we would see a much bigger emphasis on individual player development.
Okay.
Starting from a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
Coaches would be encouraged to tailor their training programs to each player's needs based on their biological maturity.
So instead of a one-size-fits-all approach, it's more like personalized coaching.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that could lead to a more holistic approach to athlete development, where we're thinking about physical, technical, tactical, and even psychological aspects.
Wow.
It's about nurturing the whole athlete.
Right.
Not just trying to fit them into a specific role.
I can see how that would benefit the players in the long run.
Definitely.
I also imagine that scouting would change.
Yeah.
Scouts would have to find new ways to evaluate talent.
Right.
Moving beyond just size and strength.
Exactly.
And looking for those less obvious signs of skill, intelligence, and potential.
Right. They'd have to become more like talent detectives.
I love that.
Piecing together clues about a player's potential based on their performance in their bioband, their individual skills, their work ethic, and their ability to learn and adapt.
It would be a much more nuanced and insightful way to identify talent.
Definitely.
Instead of just looking for the biggest, strongest kids,
Right.
Scouts would be searching for those hidden gems who might have been overlooked before.
And I think that could lead to a much more diverse group of players making it to the higher levels of hockey.
Right.
We might see more late bloomers, more players with unique skill sets, and a wider variety of playing styles.
Which would make the game even more fun to watch.
Exactly. It would be so exciting.
So it's like biobanding could open up all these new possibilities, not just for individual players, but for the sport as a whole.
I agree. It's a paradigm shift that could really change the future of hockey.
Okay, so we've painted this pretty optimistic picture of a hockey world with biobanding.
Yeah.
But let's be real. There are probably going to be some unexpected challenges and consequences along the way, right?
Of course, change is rarely easy or predictable.
Right.
And there will definitely be bumps in the road.
Yeah.
One concern is that biobanding could become too rigid or formulaic. We don't want to create a system where players are stuck in a box based only on their biological maturity.
Right.
With no room for flexibility or individual differences.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a straitjacket.
Exactly.
It's a framework for creating a more fair and development-focused environment.
Right.
But it shouldn't stifle creativity or change the natural flow of the game.
We need to remember that biological maturity is just one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
There are many other factors that contribute to a player's potential and success.
So it's about finding the right balance between structure and flexibility.
Exactly.
Between science and intuition.
Right. And that will require constant evaluation and adaptation as we learn more about the effects of biobanding.
And how it works with all the other factors that influence player development. Another potential problem is that biobanding could create a false sense of security or complacency. We don't want players to think they can just coast.
Right.
Or coaches to lower their expectations.
Right. It's important to remember that biobanding is just a tool.
Okay.
And like any tool, it can be used well or poorly.
It's not a magic solution that will fix everything in youth hockey.
Exactly. It's a way to help achieve a goal.
Okay.
And how well it works depends on how it's implemented, monitored, and adapted over time.
So it's a journey, not a destination.
Well said.
And it's a journey that will require collaboration, communication, and a willingness to learn and adapt.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about the potential benefits and the challenges.
Yeah.
But what about the long-term implications of biobanding? If it does become widespread, how do you think it will change how we think about sports in general?
That's a really interesting question.
Right.
It's like biobanding is forcing us to confront some really deep-seated beliefs about competition and talent and what youth sports are really all about. For decades, we've been obsessed with finding the next big thing, pushing kids to specialize early,
Right.
and creating these super competitive environments where winning is seen as the only thing that matters.
It's like we've built this pressure cooker where kids are expected to be elite athletes from a very young age.
Yeah.
And if they're not, they're seen as failures or like they're falling behind.
And in that pursuit of excellence,
Yeah.
we've often forgotten about the individual needs of young athletes,
Right.
the importance of long-term development, and the simple joy of playing and learning for the love of the game.
Biobanding, in a way, is like a rejection of that win-at-all-costs mentality. It's a shift towards a more holistic and humane approach to youth sports, where the focus is on nurturing the physical, mental, and emotional well-being of each athlete.
It's about creating an environment where kids can develop their skills and their passion for the sport at their own pace.
Right.
Without feeling pressured to perform or afraid of being left behind.
It's about recognizing that there are many different ways to be successful,
Uh-huh.
and that the journey is just as important as the destination.
Exactly. It's about fostering a love of the game that will last a lifetime.
Right. Whether they become professional athletes or not.
Exactly.
It's like we're changing how we view sports from something that's transactional,
Okay.
where it's all about winning and achieving a specific outcome,
Yeah.
to something that's transformational, where the focus is on personal growth, character development, and striving for excellence in all areas of life.
I love that.
Yeah,
It's pretty powerful.
it really is.
So instead of seeing youth sports as just a way to produce elite athletes or get college scholarships, we're starting to see them as a way to help kids grow as people, to build resilience, to learn how to work together,
Right.
and to develop a passion for something bigger than themselves.
And that shift in perspective could have a huge impact on society as a whole.
Wow, how so?
Imagine a generation of young people who are not only physically fit,
But also mentally strong, emotionally intelligent, and socially connected.
they've learned about teamwork, perseverance, and the importance of pursuing their passions no matter what.
Exactly. That's a powerful legacy.
Right.
And it's one that could extend far beyond sports.
Okay, so we've gone pretty deep here.
We have.
Maybe even deeper than we planned to go with this biobanding conversation.
But that's what's so great about exploring new ideas.
Right.
You never know where they'll lead you, what connections you'll make, or what new insights you'll discover.
Exactly. It's all about embracing the unknown and being open to new possibilities.
Right.
And speaking of possibilities, let's bring it back to our listeners for a minute.
Okay.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
And I'm curious to know what's resonating with you.
Me too. It's always interesting to hear how these conversations spark new thoughts and ideas for our listeners.
So here's something to think about.
Okay.
What if biobanding was used in youth sports everywhere? How do you think it would change your their school or even your own family?
Would it create more opportunities for young athletes to participate and thrive?
Right.
Would it lead to a healthier and more balanced approach to competition?
Would it change how you think about talent and success and what youth sports are really all about?
Those are some big questions.
Right.
And there aren't any easy answers.
But they're definitely worth thinking about.
Yeah, especially as we consider the future of youth sports.
And the kind of world we want to create for the next generation of athletes.
I agree. It's about looking beyond the wins and losses.
Right.
And recognizing the incredible impact that sports can have on young people.
On their minds, their character, and their lifelong love of movement and competition.
Yeah.
And it's about making sure that every child, no matter their physical attributes or how fast or slow they develop,
Right.
has the chance to experience the joy, the challenge, and the transformative power of sports So we've really gone deep on this topic of biobanding, huh?
We have.
From all the details of that Swedish study to some pretty big questions about the future of youth sports.
It's been quite a journey.
I don't know about you, but I'm walking away with so many new thoughts and questions.
Me too. It's amazing how one research study can spark so much discussion.
Right. It really shows that we're always learning, always growing, always looking for ways to make things better for young athletes.
Exactly.
So we talked about the potential benefits of biobanding, the challenges of putting it into practice, the impact it could have on talent development, and even like the big philosophical questions it raises about competition and what youth sports are really all about.
Right, like what's the real goal here?
Exactly.
It's been fascinating, and I hope it's made you think differently about youth sports.
Yeah, whether you're a coach, a parent, or just a fan.
Right, everyone has a stake in this.
You know, it's so easy to get caught up in the wins and losses, the rankings, all that pressure to perform.
Yeah, it's easy to lose sight of what's really important.
But biobanding reminds us to step back and focus on the big picture, you know?
It's about creating an environment where every young athlete feels supported and challenged in a way that helps them grow.
Not just physically, but emotionally and mentally, too.
Right. It's about developing a love for the game, a sense of teamwork, and those life skills that will help them no matter what they do in life.
Yeah, like resilience, perseverance, learning to work together, striving for excellence.
Exactly. Those are the things that matter in the long run.
And ultimately, it's about making youth sports more inclusive and fair so that every child has the chance to discover their passion and reach their full potential.
I couldn't agree more.
We've shared a lot of information with you today.
We have.
But we hope you're walking away with more than just facts and figures.
Right. Hopefully you're feeling inspired and maybe even a little bit challenged.
We want you to feel that sense of possibility, that there are new ways to approach youth sports and that we can always be doing better.
And remember, this whole conversation started with just one research study.
Right.
There's so much more to learn out there.
So stay curious, keep asking questions, and be an advocate for positive change in your own community.
Whether you're a coach, a parent, an athlete, or just a fan, you have a voice, and you can make a difference.
So let's keep this conversation going.
Yeah. Let's share our thoughts, challenge the status quo, and work together to create a better experience for all young athletes. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into biobanding.
It's been a pleasure exploring this topic with you.
And we can't wait to share our next deep dive with you soon.
Until then, stay curious, stay engaged, and keep on diving deep.
Thanks for tuning in to the Science of Hockey. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to share it with your friends, teammates, or anyone who loves hockey as much as you do. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment to let us know what you liked, what you'd like to hear next, or any questions you have. Your feedback helps us make the show even better. Until next time, keep your skates sharp, your mind open, and keep chasing the science behind the game.